Okay, now that we know that the simple aspect refers to actions that happened, or will happen in a permanent or continuous way, we're going to associate this aspect to the present tense and the zero conditional. I know you're familiar to these topics, but let's see how they are used and how useful they can be for us. Before we start, let's pay attention to these two examples. Women put into practice their right to vote every election period, or I read global news to be up to date. What we have here are two clear examples of actions that have become part of our daily lives, our routines, or something that we repeat constantly in our social life, because they are associated to aspects that deal or have to do with the way we react or we perform in the society. So we can say that the present tense is basically used to refer to habitual actions, to routines, or something that is repeated constantly in the present. Okay, so it's easy to use this tense for us. Now, how can I connect, or we can connect this tense to the use of zero conditional? Now, remember that conditionals have many variations. We can have zero conditional, first conditional, second conditional, third conditional, and mixed conditionals. But don't worry, we're going to focus only on zero conditional, the easiest one. Okay, once again, let's review to these two examples. If I don't respect other people's rights, I get into trouble. Or if you want to change your present, you have to learn from your past. What we see here in these two examples is that they are referring to facts that is something that is generally true, or in this case, it's completely true in our daily lives. It's obvious that we have respect because we give respect to others, and that our present is not that good if I don't learn from my past. So the use of these tenses is the same, let's say, but we have to refer to different kinds of ideas. In the case of the present tense, we're going to be talking about routines or things that happened every day. And in the case of zero conditional, we're going to talk about facts, a present situation with the real consequence. To enrich our sentences, to give more information about the actions that we perform, we can also include the use of frequency adverbs. They are very commonly used with the present tense. Frequency adverbs are words that indicate the frequency, as they say, or to express how often the action is performed. Okay, let's check this example. Students usually attend to demonstrations to defend their rights. It's quite common nowadays because we have the right to do that. And in this case, we're going to focus on usually. Usually refers to how often students, in this case, take this action in part. We have other frequency adverbs, not only usually. We have, for example, always, never, hardly ever, often, sometimes, and rarely. And they indicate a certain degree. If we go from 0 to 100, for example, we can use each one depending on how often I take part in this action. Now, the place for us to use the frequency adverbs in a sentence is going to be as follows. We're going to place them in between the subject and the main verb, with exception to verb to be, because in this case, we're going to be placing the frequency adverb after verb to be. Remember, am, is, or are. Now, there are also some frequency expressions, not really frequency adverbs. We check frequency adverbs most of the times are only one word. But in the frequency expression, we're going to be using more than one word. So it can be an adverb followed by a noun, okay? So let's see this example. It is good to support social movements once a year. Or if you read about history a little every day, you understand your present better. Over here, we're using also the frequency expression in a conditional sentence. So if you check opposed to the use or to the place the frequency adverb takes in the sentence, that is between the subject and the main verb, in the case of a frequency expression, they can be placed at the end of the sentence, that's the most common position, or at the very beginning of the sentence, depending on how you want to emphasize this situation. There are some other frequency expressions, these two are not the only ones, such as once a week, on Monday, in the afternoon, every year, or on weekends. They also will depend on the use on how often you want to express the action. Okay, so as you can see, it's quite easy to understand this topic, not that complicated as you thought. Let's check the structure of the creation of sentences in the present tense. If we want to talk about affirmative sentences, then we have the following structure. The subject, because it's the person who's going to perform the action. The verb in the present form. Let's be careful over here. Remember that we have two types of subjects. The subjects that have to do with pronouns such as I, you, we, or they, and the ones that have to do with he, she, it. So when we are going to be using verbs that have to do with the third person, he, she, it, we have to be careful to add s, es, or ies, depending on the ending of each verb. So over here, we have to focus on that part, that there is a small change in the verb in the present tense, only third person. And we can have a complement as well. Now, in the case of a negative sentences, we're going to be using, once again, the subject at the beginning, an auxiliary verb, in this case, do or does. Do will be used with I, you, we, or they, and does with he, she, it. And in this case, the verb goes in a simple form. There is no need for us to add es, ies, s, because it is already taken by the auxiliary. And we're going to be using a complement. Remember to add not in these sentences because we're talking about a negative one. And you can make a contraction. Don't, doesn't. Okay. In the case of questions, we're going to be changing the place between the subject and the auxiliary verb. So we're going to place the auxiliary verb at the very beginning, do or does. Then we're going to be using the subject, and the verb once again goes in a simple form. We have a complement, and please don't forget the question mark. Otherwise, it's not a question. So as you can see, this topic is not that complicated, and now we know a little bit more about how to use either the present tense or the conditional. We share the same structure over here. Now, in the case of the zero conditional, remember we're referring to a condition and a consequence, but in the present, that's a fact, something real. We're going to be introducing our clause with if, which is the condition, and the consequence in the present tense. In both cases, both sentences use the present tense. Now, if we're going to start our sentence with if I don't respect others, comma, I don't get respect. We're going to separate the consequence by a comma. But I can make a change in the sentences. If I start with the consequence, I don't get respect, and then I introduce the condition, if I don't respect others, there is no need for us to write any comma, because if works as the connector for both sentences. So this is how we can use present simple in our daily lives and routines, and the zero conditional to refer to facts or general truths. Hope this video is useful for you, and now it's time to practice a little bit. enjoy this course. Thank you and have a nice day.